So the federal rules of evidence do not contain Rule 616. However, many state codes have this provision in it, and I included it in these readings because it offers a lot of clarity to understanding the interpretation of the rules under the federal system. If you look at State Rule 616, and that's in many states, I don't think Pennsylvania has it, but a number of states do have this. If you look at it, it lays out the areas in which you are allowed to present extrinsic evidence and where you are only allowed to cross-examine the witness about certain topics. So remember in one of our previous cases, we talked about the 5 basic ways of cross-examination. Well, Rule 616 lays that they break it down with a different number, but they offer the different methods of cross-examination. And this rule describes when you're allowed to actually bring in outside evidence as opposed to just examining the witness and asking the witness about certain specific instances. So if you are cross-examining the witness on bias, you're of course allowed to ask the witness about don't you hate a certain group of people? Don't you have a prejudice? Don't you have a reason to dislike your neighbor? But you're also allowed to present extrinsic evidence. You're allowed to present the diary entry, the videotape, whatever it is that shows the bias that you're trying to demonstrate. In the case of Mark Furman, the detective in the O.J. Simpson case, we had a quiz question on this. You're allowed to bring in Laura Hart McKinney, who would testify that the detective used a racial epithet in talking with her. That's extrinsic evidence, someone else who can testify to a certain fact. Sensory or mental defect. I wear glasses. I can't see without them. You could bring in, you could not only ask me about my glasses, but you could subpoena the records of my doctor and find out how strong my prescription is. And you could enter the prescription into evidence to show how poor my eyesight is. So to show sensory or mental defect, you can offer extrinsic evidence. Now, what about specific contradictions? So whether that's a prior inconsistent statement or that is, you say X and I say Y. You said that the carpeting in the bedroom was red, and there's another witness who says it's blue. Now, if the only reason you're offering the person's prior inconsistent story, or the fact that your story is different than someone else's, or that the witness's story is different than someone else's, is merely to show that the witness misstates things in general, then you don't get to bring in the extrinsic evidence. Let's say, what color was the door in the house when you went in? And one person says red. I said, would it surprise you to learn that the detective who investigated this case said it was yellow? The person might answer yes, no, but unless that color of the door has some material bearing on the case, you can't bring in the other witness who said it was yellow. And so when we look at our next case, we will examine the question of whether something is material to the case, or whether it merely shows that the witness is a bad reporter of facts because he or she gets them inconsistent with his or her prior story, or because he or she gets them inconsistent with other people's stories. If you're just showing this person's a bad relator of fact generally, you don't get to do anything more with the prior inconsistent statement or the contradictory statement with someone else other than ask about it. But when those inconsistent stories by the witness or those contradictory stories with other witnesses are very much at issue in what we're trying to resolve in this case, then at that point, you do get to bring in the extrinsic evidence, the other witnesses, the diary entries, those things that have bearing on this case, and offer those in evidence as extrinsic evidence.